In your point of view, church leaders and Christians are planning to stage a mass gathering on the lawns of the Union buildings in Pretoria from around 10 o'clock this morning to protest against the unfair treatment of the church under lockdown, which they see as an attack on Christianity. Pastors from different churches have even threatened to mobilize their members against voting for the ANC should the government fail to heed their call to allow 100% attendance during services. At least 2,000 people from across Gauteng will be bussed to the venue to voice their disgruntlement at the government's COVID-19 regulation, which limits the attendance in churches to 50 people. To discuss this further, I'm joined now by protest organizer, Advocate Mo Afrika Maila, who will be expanding on what is expected. Very good morning to you, Advocate. Thank you for your time. Tell us what the plan of action is for today.
Good morning to you and all your viewers at home. Today, the plan of action is that we'll be gathering here at the Union building, and we will be here to address all the media, to speak out our grievances against the government for the ongoing unfair treatment and discrimination on the church. Because you will remember that the church has always been subjected to unfair opening in all these levels of lockdown, despite how many efforts they have tried.
You've said that this move of the lockdown and the restrictions of 50 congregants in the church is an attack on Christianity. How so?
It is an attack on Christianity because they know quite well that the church is one of the most influential institutions. Therefore, they want to reduce the numbers of the church, knowing quite well that if you put 50 people, the churches have got building up to 3,000, the churches have got buildings up to 1,000. But then what is the rationale of putting only 50 people? So that is where we are having a challenge of saying, if you want to put 50 people in the church, you are simply sabotaging Christian community, because many of them, they will never be able to be in church. And being in church is very important. Is a central, being in a gathering of the believers is a central aspect of Christian faith.
And what about the other alternatives when it comes to practicing religion in the Christian religion, when it comes to perhaps virtual ways to mobilize and still gather in faith?
Let's talk about South Africa and its levels of poverty and unemployment. If you say there has to be a virtual gathering, you mean that we must, somebody must have one gig in order for them to enjoy a 3-hour service. But then think about it this way. Remember that data in South Africa is very expensive than in any other country in the world. And therefore, you are talking a country that has got 50% of youth unemployment and also the skyrocketing high unemployment levels. Therefore, if you are saying we must opt for online, our people, do they have smartphones? Our churches, are they having the proper equipment for them to be able to deliver such kind of a service that will be good for the people who will be watching online? This is practically for those few individuals with privilege. It's not for the entire masses of the Christian community, which are ranking from poor, unemployed, and also the destitute communities that are not in the urban communities like Gauteng, so on and so forth.
Advocate, are you aware of the implications of the COVID-19 pandemic? As you and I speak today, in the last 24 hours alone, 268 people have succumbed to COVID-19. And as a country, we're fast approaching the 80,000 mark when it comes to perhaps the number of infections and fatalities. And 9,476 people have already succumbed to COVID-19 in the 4 weeks since President Cyril Ramaphosa made that announcement. Is that a concern at all for you?
It is 101% concern to me. And I have to state this and be clear to you. During Easter, we were told that third wave will begin to hit South Africa. But that has never happened. Why it never happened? Because there has been so much of carefulness in the church and responsibility. Now, the church has proved to be able to sanitize, to social distance, to do all these. Instead, the church is the one that is unfairly mistreated, that is on the arbitrary receiving end of the law application, and equally so this whole treatment of lockdown. I have to make this clear to you to say we are aware of the death, we are aware of that, and we are worried about the stigmatization of the church to be a place that is there to spread COVID-19. Whereas the church itself, it has been one of the most compliant in all senses. So if ever we say people are dying they dying in the church? But the malls are open, the restaurants are open, all of them, they're open on 50% capacity. Why can't we be given the same capacity which is safe? The taxis are on 100%, the flights, the buses. Then are you saying all this death that you are speaking about are caused by the church? Yeah, you are also, that statement also, when we're speaking about the church, is still unfair discrimination and stigmatization of the church that we are totally and utterly speaking against.
What happens in a place of worship? Congregants gather, they're very relaxed, and they can gather in their hundreds of thousands when it comes to the services that take place. People easily take off their masks in praise and in their spiritual mode. That in itself could pose a serious danger, especially, Advocate Maila, as we know that vaccine hesitancy is a massive factor when it comes to those who are hesitant on taking the vaccine, that, you know, could then curb the goal of reaching herd immunity. There's also another problem where the Western Cape Health MEC, for instance, has said that the high level of vaccine hesitancy is also attributed by misinformation from general practitioners and religious leaders, which would involve you.
Which involves me. Interesting, but nonetheless.
Which involves religious leaders such as yourself. That's what I mean, Advocate.
Yes, I understand when you say which involve religious leaders such as me. Let me say this to begin with. You see, people have got the rights either to vaccinate or not be vaccinated. Therefore, it is so much unfair to say the church has been responsible for sabotaging the rollout of a vaccine. Let us begin to say this. If anyone is speaking against the vaccine in the church, it's through their constitutional right of freedom of expression. And still it continues to be within an individual's right of bodily right to say, I don't want to vaccinate or I'll vaccinate. Therefore, the closing of the church is to say they want to allow the vaccination to roll because the church numbers are opposing this vaccine. But the truth is, we've got churches that are not opposing vaccine. It varies from one church to another church. Here we are not here to talk about necessarily the vaccine or so on and so forth. We said ourselves, the movement I'm leading, said those who want to vaccinate is their choice. Those who don't want to is still their choice. Therefore, why then are they attributing it to the church? Whereas there are so many questions that the citizens themselves are having about vaccines that the government has never made it a point to say they must answer such questions. And it's so much unfair of the MEC of such a province to be saying that, because in Gauteng, we've got churches that are being used as a vaccination site. In Soweto, we have them. In Soshanguve, we have them. I've seen many of them. Then let's agree to disagree on a point of saying the church is regarded as a problem unfairly without following any proper channels of properly or clearly identifying where the questions of church people be answered. Let the questions of church people be answered so that this vaccine can roll without any challenges in the church.
Now,
Thank you.
Should you be successful in your demand, I mean, you've already threatened here not to vote for the ANC if your demand is not met. And, you know, when it comes to perhaps you get a yes and they do allow more congregants in the church space, what are some of the precautionary measures you'll be taking? And perhaps what message will you be sending as an influential body within society when it comes to vaccines and COVID-19?
Necessarily, we are not trained, as we're told when we ask questions, that we must not speak about vaccine. It's for scientists and medical practitioners. We will allow it to those who are trained to do so. And we will continue to preach the Bible. We'll continue to preach the Word of God. And on Monday, I'll continue to be a legal practitioner, as that's the space I'm trained in. we are not going to speak much about vaccine except to say people have got a right to make their choices, either to or not. That's what we're going to say. We're not going to be more than anything into pro or we're not going to be the protagonist or antagonist of the vaccine. We're going to remain in the space that we've always remained in.
And how has this closure affected the Christian faith and churches who also have some sort of financial reliance on church operations?
Look, we must begin to understand the church is an organization. We pay electric bills, we pay water bills, we pay municipality tariffs, we pay staff members, we also pay the pastors who are working in the churches. Therefore, when the churches are closed, it's as good as any other business or any other organization is closed. There has been so much of dire effects that are so bad on us, in a sense that most of the churches have lost their buildings. Some of the churches, they were never able to recover to pay their staff members. And more than anything, majority of South Africans have been thrusted into depression because they don't have the spiritual support they receive from their spiritual men and women of God, whom are their leaders, their pastors. So that's what we need to look at necessarily, into the impact that it had into the lives of individuals. Thank you.
Very well. Let's leave it there for now. I thank you for your time. A protest organizer, one of the organizers, Advocate Mo Afrika Maila, speaking there about the church's disgruntlement when it comes to the restrictions and congregants only allowed to be restricted at 50 in accordance to the lockdown regulations. And they are staging a protest outside the union buildings, saying that government needs to meet them halfway. We will continue to bring you that story throughout the course of the morning, of course keeping track of how many people have attended and how that is going.